Thanks a lot, Dominic. And for more, we are joined by journalist Jamilah King. She recently penned a piece for the American Prospect on Stop and Frisk, highlighting its impact on the culture of New York City. Jamilah, thanks for a few minutes. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
It's interesting. We've spoken to just about every mayoral candidate, including Billy Thompson. And none of them, I think with the exception of one candidate, wants to ban outright stop and frisk. Many want to amend the actual procedure and process and change it, but they don't want to get rid of it. At the end of the day, do you think that's what this verdict probably would do? It won't get rid of the whole procedure. It'll only change it.
I do think that at the end of the day, this verdict that's being discussed now will actually lead to reforms of stop and frisk. I don't think it's going anywhere, and I say that because Mayor Bloomberg and Commissioner Kelly have been very, very adamant in their support of the program. They've said that they believe it. They said believe in it. They've said that it's working, and you know, the idea and notion of what's quote unquote working is something that's very, very you know, up for debate in New York City and specifically in communities of color. But you know, I do think that there are going to be some reforms, and I think those reforms are necessary.
But do you think that you can still have a process that gives discretion as to whoever law enforcement believes is credible to be stopped, that you can still have this kind of a procedure without amount of discretion, and it won't have the same kind of results we have now, which is overwhelmingly Black and Latino people being stopped in overwhelmingly minority neighborhoods? Are you okay with tweaking the system but still keeping it?
You know, I think at the end of the day, you have a lot of organizing that's going on in New York City. You have a lot of folks who are saying that, no, reforms aren't enough. We want actual change. We want there to be some sort of internal process of accountability to make sure that, you know, a specific racial and ethnic group of people, which in this case are Black and brown folks, are not being targeted for the perceived actions of some folks in that group.
One of the arguments for people who support the procedure is they say, go to the Brownsvilles, go to the Bushwicks, go to the tougher areas. They don't want to go back to the days of high crime here. It's not a perfect system. Do people get singled out to do absolutely nothing wrong here and sometimes create a level of distrust even more than was there before for the communities and the cops? But consider the alternative. Can you have both safety without this level of policing in high crime-ridden areas?
So I think the issue is whether or not we as a society think that it's fair that people who have not committed any crime are treated like criminals. And in my reporting, for instance, in Brownsville, you have folks who know what it's like to grow up in a very, very violent neighborhood. They remember the days when crime in New York City was incredibly you know, rampant, and it was leading the country, and they don't want to return to those days. At the same time, the initiatives that helped get to that place are not just the initiatives that are hardcore policing and things like stop and frisk, right? You have to be able to engage the community in a conversation. You have to be able to make sure that that community does not see you as the enemy.
If you go to some of the areas that you've done a lot of your reporting in and you said, all right, here's the choice we can have. We can stick with this procedure here that the vast majority think is unfair here, and a lot of these guys can speak from firsthand perspective what it's been like here to go through it. Or we can have half the police presence we currently have, and you're not going to have the process, and as an argument for the cops at least, you're going to have less the deterrent. Which would they choose of those?
So I think with stop and frisk, all you need to do is look at the stats, right? And so Mayor Bloomberg and Commissioner Kelly have repeatedly said that the rationale for stop and frisk is to get guns off the street and make neighborhoods safer. But repeatedly you see that stop and frisks actually don't lead to the seizure of guns. Very, very few guns have actually gotten off the streets of New York City thanks to stop and frisk. What you have are a lot of low-level arrests. You have a lot of ticketing for things that, you know, every kid does, right? Hanging out late or playing basketball at the park. And folks are kind of being labeled as suspects because of those activities. And I think that's the dangerous part, right? Like, I think that it's not so black and white. You've got to be able to look at the nuance of it, and you've got to be able to figure out a way that you can keep communities safe while maintaining folks' humanity.
What was your reaction when you heard Commissioner Kelly's comments about that both minorities being understopped and also this process that has saved minority lives? Is he right here, or is he missing the point?
I think he's missing the point. I think he's in a lot of ways missing the point that you cannot criminalize an entire racial group of people based off of the perceived actions of some folks in that group.
Again, Jamilah's piece is titled Black, Brown, and Blue, and we have linked it to our site. Jamilah, great job. I appreciate a few minutes. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.